It had been coming for a long time. In Soapland, evil is rarely allowed to flourish forever, and sooner or later, Emmerdale's most ruthless farmer was always destined to pay the ultimate price. Celia Daniels, chillingly portrayed by Jay Griffiths, finally met her downfall in scenes so dark, so shocking, and so emotionally twisted that viewers are still struggling to process what they saw. And in a stroke of storytelling irony that only Emmerdale could pull off, it wasn't a rival gangster or vengeful victim who delivered justice, it was her own son. Ray Walters, Joe Absolom, Celia's loyal lieutenant and adopted heir, turned the knife on the woman who raised him, controlled him, and molded him into a monster. It was betrayal, tragedy, and poetic justice all rolled into one jaw-dropping moment. A murder that felt inevitable, yet still landed like a punch to the gut. But just as fans are catching their breath, Emmerdale bosses have confirmed that Celia's death is only the beginning. Another major character is set to leave the village in shocking circumstances, and the fallout could tear the Dales apart. So who's next to go? And what does Ray's bloody act mean for April, Dylan, Laurel, and Ray himself? Let's break it all down. Celia Daniels wasn't just another soap villain. She was cold, calculating, and terrifyingly believable. Under the guise of a successful farmer, she ran a shadowy criminal operation that exploited the vulnerable and crushed anyone who stood in her way. Her crimes weren't petty. Celia was responsible for modern slavery, human trafficking, drug distribution, and psychological abuse on a devastating scale. She coerced people who had nowhere else to turn, people like Beowulf, into lives of fear and servitude. She preyed on broken teenagers, forcing April Windsor and Dylan Penders into county lines drug trafficking with threats that left their families living in terror. And through it all, Ray stood by her side, or so we thought. Until recently, Ray Walters was Celia's right-hand man, ruthless, efficient, and seemingly devoid of remorse. He enforced her orders without question, collected debts, delivered threats, and helped maintain the criminal empire that poisoned the village from the shadows. But beneath the hardened exterior, cracks were forming. Ray wasn't born into this life. He was shaped by it. Celia adopted Ray when he was young, but rather than offering love and stability, she weaponized his trauma. She raised him with control, manipulation, and emotional cruelty, grooming him into the perfect soldier while reminding him constantly that he owed her everything. Yet one thing Celia never accounted for was Ray developing feelings, and that feeling had a name: Laurel Thomas. Laurel Thomas, Charlotte Bellamy, has always been one of Emmerdale's moral anchors, kind-hearted, forgiving, and endlessly compassionate. When Ray entered her orbit, it felt like a curious but harmless pairing. Laurel saw a man who was damaged, yes, but redeemable. Someone who needed understanding, not judgment. For Ray, Laurel represented something he never had: warmth, acceptance, and the possibility of a future not soaked in fear and blood. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Ray began to imagine a different life. One without Celia, one without crime, one where he wasn't constantly looking over his shoulder. And that dream proved fatal. Celia had one final test for her son. On New Year's Eve, she ordered Ray to kill April Windsor, a teenage girl who had already endured more trauma than anyone her age should ever have to face. This time, Ray refused. What followed was one of Emmerdale's most harrowing confrontations in recent memory. Celia exploded with rage. She accused Ray of weakness, betrayal, and ingratitude. She mocked his feelings for Laurel and sneered at his fantasy of a normal life. Then, with cruel precision, she ripped open wounds Ray had spent years trying to bury, dredging up his abusive childhood, reminding him of his worthlessness, and reducing him to a shaking, sobbing wreck. When words weren't enough, Celia struck him. A slap that echoed through the room and through Ray's soul. Then came the emotional whiplash. In classic abuser fashion, Celia tried to undo the damage with a hug, whispering that she loved him, that she was proud. But something inside Ray finally snapped. In a moment that left viewers stunned into silence, Ray plunged a knife into his mother's chest. There was no dramatic music, no last-minute interruption. Just raw horror. As Celia lay dying, bleeding out on the floor, she looked up at her son and delivered her final, chilling words, "I'm so proud of you." Even in death, Celia asserted control, framing her murder as proof that Ray had become exactly what she wanted him to be. It was a line that sent shivers down spines and cemented Celia Daniels as one of Emmerdale's most unforgettable villains. As viewers reeled from Celia's death, Emmerdale dropped another bombshell. Another character connected to this storyline will soon leave the village in shocking circumstances. Naturally, speculation has gone into overdrive. Who could it be? Let's examine the possibilities. Could April Windsor be the one to leave? April Windsor is the most obvious candidate, and the most heartbreaking. After everything she's been through, killing April off would feel devastatingly cruel. Kidnapped, threatened, exploited, and nearly murdered, April has already survived a living nightmare. But she doesn't have to die to leave. On New Year's Eve, Ray handed April a large stack of cash and urged her to run, to disappear somewhere Celia could never find her. Even with Celia now dead, April may feel the damage is irreversible. The Dales have become a place of fear and trauma. Staying might be impossible. There's also the uncomfortable truth that Ray has never taken full responsibility for his actions. Could he blame April for pushing him to kill his mother? Could he see her as a loose end? Or might April choose freedom, taking Ray's blood-stained money and starting again somewhere far away? Given that her entire family has been threatened, it's possible the Windsors could leave together, vanishing for the sake of survival. What about Dylan Penders? Then there's Dylan, quiet, loyal, and deeply traumatized. Dylan has lost more than most. Beowulf's death weighs heavily on him, and the guilt of feeling powerless to stop the horrors inflicted by Celia and Ray may prove unbearable. With April gone, Dylan could spiral, blaming himself, blaming Ray, blaming the village itself. Leaving might feel like the only way to survive, a fresh start, a chance to escape the ghosts. Or is Ray Walters the one heading for the exit? Let's be honest. The most likely departure is Ray himself. He's just murdered his mother. The police are closing in. Secrets are circling. The one thing tying him to the village is Laurel, and that bond is hanging by a thread. Laurel doesn't yet know the full truth about Ray's criminal empire. She doesn't know where his money came from. She doesn't know what he's done to April and Dylan. And while Laurel is famously forgiving, even she has limits. So what happens next? The most straightforward outcome is prison. Celia once sneered that Ray wouldn't survive a day behind bars, a cruel taunt that now feels like foreshadowing. For many fans, prison would feel like justice. Ray has hurt too many people to walk free. A prison sentence would also offer a grim symmetry. Celia used the threat of jail to control Ray, and now that threat becomes reality. Redemption, if it comes, would be hard-won. Ray has made enemies everywhere. Dylan could snap, seeking vengeance for April and Bear. Marlon Dingle and Rona Goskirk have been extorted for thousands of pounds to keep April safe. If they discover just how close Ray came to killing their daughter, all bets are off. And then there's Laurel. If she uncovers the truth and realizes her children were endangered, could even gentle Laurel be pushed too far? Soap history says never underestimate the quiet ones. Ray fleeing the village feels very plausible. A new identity, a new location, a fresh start built on lies. And then there's that tantalizing tease, a future storyline involving a woman tied up in the back of a van and a mysterious man. Could Ray be that man? Could he already be slipping back into old habits, unable to escape the monster Celia created? Off course. Fans have thrown out some truly wild ideas. Celia faked her death and returns for revenge. Ray is secretly connected to Charity Dingle's pregnancy. Ray is abducted, killed off-screen, or vanishes without a trace or, in true soap madness, aliens get involved. Never say never whatever happens. One thing is certain. Never a dull moment in the Dale's Celia Daniels' death marks the end of one chapter. But the consequences will ripple through Emmerdale for months to come. Lies have been shattered. Secrets are ticking time bombs. And at the heart of it all is a broken man who finally stood up to his abuser. By becoming her executioner, justice, tragedy, and moral ambiguity collide. And fans wouldn't have it any other way, because in Emmerdale, evil never disappears quietly.